What you're basically saying is there needs to be some sort of entry exam where you have like 4 to 5 years, about the same time as a proper education, where you graduate from your natty status. Like with the knowledge you have access to now and how you would design that for guys that would do their first cycle, what do you think needs to be in place before people even think about taking PEDs?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you need to go through just a lot of understanding of just what you're about to jump into. Of course, I think you need time as well to train naturally to maximize those variables, because you see so often that guys are going to jump on and you can easily mask a poor diet, training, a recovery protocols just with using more gear. And then you eventually hit this roadblock where like you had high dosage of gear and you still don't look enormous. And you're like, well, now you have to backpedal and figure out why is that is. And usually you just like, oh, let me just take more of these drugs in place. So I think having some time spent training naturally has a huge benefit. What I usually outline is like spend at least 3 to 5 quality years. I mean quality. So doing all these things right before making the decision to move on. Because within the first like year of someone trained naturally, like you can make substantial progress, and then kind of every year it get halved from there. So when you get to the point where in a year you're adding maybe 3 pounds of tissue on, this might be the consideration point for like moving to enhanced area. Where does that look like age wise? Well, I wouldn't have touched anything being 18, 19 years old. Probably 19 to 20, you see some of your peak hormone levels in the blood. Maximize those, like absolutely. And even at that age, I didn't have the awareness of what to do with training and nutrition and even my recovery aspect. Even for males, we don't see like full brain development till you're around 25 years old. So there's an aspect of like, do you really want to expose yourself to like neurotoxicity and the neurodegeneration potential around steroids when you haven't even reached your full brain development yet? Also, just the maturation side, right? Like being in my early 20s, like probably wasn't the best decision of what I wanted to do, even long-term career-wise. So I would say, hey, first exposures, you might consider getting out of college, being in this kind of like 23-year-old era. Then you have the potential of like how long exposure wise to reach a pro ranks. If that's your goal, 10, 15 years of exposure could take you up to the pro level. And that's being, at 35, where we see a lot of guys are peaking in their prime.
Starting to peak, right?
I think this timeline kind of makes a lot of sense. Now I know that doesn't fit for everyone, because you have guys getting into it later. So that kind of changes the dynamic there. But I think giving yourself some time to train naturally, maximize what you already have, would be essential. From there, I think, guys, would be just a questionnaire that you need to go through of PED preparedness to say, like, what is the need of your division? This probably caters more to like the female population. There's a lot you can do before you jump into gear with if you're competing on bikini, or we have our new fit model division that just came out yesterday, right?
Oh yeah. Oh no. More time spent in the benches before open bodybuilding starts.
Yeah. So like these are questions that I would have in mind if I was my younger self, of like, have you spent time maximizing all your variables? Like, do you understand the short-term and long-term risk of using PEDs? Do you have some basic understanding of endocrinology and the compound risks? Do you have access to quality product? Are you shopping at GNC for hormones? Are you getting them from the steroid dealer corner, or can you access farm grade? Do you know like the supplementation that you'd even need in place to protect yourself, and how to handle like an estrogen issue or a DHT issue or whatever it may be if that was to pop up? Like, can you afford this without having limitations? I think all these questions would be at least some starting points to consider before you even move into that area. Now, guys,
So what you're basically saying is there needs to be some sort of entry exam before
nearly.
you start PEDs, where you have like 4 to 5 years, about the same time as a proper education, where you graduate from your natty status, and then based on your performance during your natty career, you might go into the next phase of performance enhancing, and that might be under guidance of a coach, or I think that's a good way. But like the way you said it, like there needs to be multiple steps in place before you even consider this kind of stuff. I think there would be some sort of entry exam, and I think a lot of people would fail on their first try, where they would say, hey, maybe you need another year in the benches before you can go to the next level. Dean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think even to build on like John, we have the old school mythology of like the 3-4-5 strength methods of being able to like bench 3 plates, squat 4, deadlift 5 to sort of reach that natural strength plateau, I guess. Like most guys will never really push themselves to the limit of reaching strength plateaus before taking the leap to being enhanced, let alone like the hormone situation of, assessing where your hormones are naturally. I think, guys jump the gun without reaching a plateau when these compounds really build upon that, central nervous system strength aspect.
Yeah. Kurt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything both of them said. I waited longer. I didn't really need drugs. I was kind of against them for a long time. And I waited until basically my body started going the other direction. When I tried to lose fat, muscle would come off. And when I tried to gain muscle, fat would come on. I was always naturally leaner. So it wasn't, I could see it in my body that was just changing. I went and got lab work done. My test was like in the low 4s. So I went on TRT. And then I was on TRT for like very short period of time before I did my first cycle.
Yeah.
Do
you think TRT is a good entry into steroids?
I was 39, so for me, so for a younger guy, big difference. I think TRT for most guys is a misused term. If you're in your 20s, most likely you don't need TRT. Like fix the lifestyle stuff, unless you actually have hypogonadism. And if you do, why? Is it primary or secondary? I think that's my problem with the online medicine stuff nowadays, is that clinics are just prescribing stuff without actually thinking of what's wrong. Why would a 25-year-old be hypogonadal?
Well, a lot of the clinics are glorified steroid dealers, and not a lot of clinics like the one we work with, Merrick Health, that one actually goes into the situation and tries to optimize the testosterone levels with sleep and healthy lifestyle and all these little things first before any kind of script needs to be taken place. And I know from the former doctor that used to work there, Dr. Adam Hotchkiss, and a couple of the current doctors that work there, is that they really assess the situation and see, well, many of the guys that think that they're androgen deficient were similar to John, where they experimented with SARMs or prohormones or something along those lines, and they shut themselves down, and they never gave themselves adequate time to kind of recover from that. And now, since all these TikTok influencers want to stay in shape 24/7, the fat intake is low and the sleep quality isn't so good. So how high can your testosterone levels come back? I think every natural should go through a period where they just, disregarding of how they look, they try to get their hormone levels as high as possible with, high food intake. And if that means you get a little bit fatter, so be it. But if you sleep better because of that, I think if you learn your basal hormonal state and try to optimize that, I think you can learn a lot about your body and actually take your physique quite far. I mean, will you look like a pro bodybuilder? Unless you're genetically inclined. We can name a couple guys that look phenomenal without PEDs, but those are the exceptions, not the norm. So I think if you're a natural guy and you're really passionate about bodybuilding, I mean, at least try to dial in your nutrition, training, supplementation. And for nutrition, it's very simple. You eat the foods that you can digest, moderate protein, high carbs, and moderate fat during the off-season, reasonably high protein, moderate carbs, and maybe lower fat during the cutting phase. And that seems to work well for most people. Carb cycling as needed based on activity levels. Supplementation is basically what you need to supplement what you can't get from your diet, and then maybe creatine monohydrate on top of that. And the rest is just extra fluff that maybe contributes 1 or 2%. I mean, let's be honest. And then, the training, most people do well with a 3 to 5 day split. And that kind of depends on your development. So if you have a lot of development that needs to take place, you do a push-pull legs, a B routine, something like that. And then maybe later on you can split it up into a 4 day split or 5 day split. And then it kind of depends on, how you develop from that, because some body parts will develop faster than other body parts. Again, a coach who understands natural bodybuilding would go a very long way. And I think now with there being a good amount of natural coaches that are specialized in natural athletes, you spend the $300, $500 for a good coach to learn it faster. And then you basically graduate yourself to your first cycle, which again, I think 1 ampule of testosterone per week, it's probably a great starting point. It's already double the reference range for most guys, or 1.5 times the reference range. And that 500 test cycle with the Anabolic kickstart that the steroid forms perpetuated, no. No, 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 no.
Yeah, you do that for 12 weeks, then you do a PCT, and it's only 12 weeks for some reason. I don't know why, but
Yeah, time on is time off, right? It's a
And
great way to
make sure you
lose
start
or
two.
gain.
Make sure you start 2 weeks after your last shot, regardless of what you took.
Yeah. And then let the nandrolone just stay active while your SCG is working. So discussing the first cycle, maybe we can start there. What do you think about the duration, compound selection, things to avoid, things to look for? Just purely from a drug perspective, we're going to assume that the athletes graduated from their natural stuff, right? So they're financially secure. They did blood work a couple times. Their nutrition training, et cetera, is all in place. What would be a good place to start? John, take it away.
sure, yeah. Just a second, one last thing that you said, Steve, is that to this day, still my greatest focus in learning is training. That's where I spend most of my time on the day, thinking how can I improve my execution throughout every set, even while I'm in the gym. It's not spend learning all about drugs all day. Most of us love it, and we go way beyond what you'd ever probably need to know. But at this level, like if you get us together with like other high level pros, it's talking about training, because that's still your greatest tool to drive this process forward. So if you like invest time in anything, like spend more in training, because even at this level, like I'm still learning and improving. So someone that's earlier on, I used to coach people and not have a weight training included, just do like nutrition and the supplementation. And people be like, "Oh, I got training. Don't worry about that." Like, man, you don't have training, because I don't even have training. I'm still figuring out. But anyway,
I think it also evolves. Like I think the intensity and knowing when to back off and when to really go for it. I think you need longer than 5 years, honestly, because I really started piecing together after 15 years of training, where you really know how to contract properly and stay in that ideal range of motion. And some exercises it's more range of motion than others. So you have this little library of how to perform each exercise to the perfect capacity. And that might be more cumbersome than learning about steroids, because every exercise is so different, and you have to work with your biomechanics. And like you could do a crash course on steroids maybe in a week, but when you train legs twice per week, I mean, how many workouts do you really need to piece it together? It might take several years.
no, absolutely.